Welcome back, nerds. Fino here with a servant guide for the professional Rama babysitter, the Asanagi class amputation master, the most loco of Cocos, Florence Nightingale. This particular version is a 5-star berserker, and she operates as both an Unga Bunga Smash sort of character and a healer/debuffer. Let me show you what I mean with some sample teams. Depending on the encounter, and especially in the early game, you have the option of throwing red cards at a problem until it goes away. Now, Nightingale herself has a low base attack for a 5-star Zerk. Like, she's middle of the pack for a 4-star berserker, but you do have some tools to make up for it. First is Mana Enhancement EX, which gives her a large passive bonus to her buster cards. Next is Angel's Cry, a substantial 3-turn targeted buster buff. And by substantial, we're talking mana burst numbers. Stick it on your boss killer or maybe your weak link to get a clean 1 turn on a wave. Another useful skill for this role is Understanding of the Human Body. This gives her damage and defense against humanoid enemies for 3 turns. What's a humanoid enemy? Most flesh and blood things with 2 legs or a human torso. Also a lot of undead, so I guess it counts if they were flesh and blood at one point. It also applies to every rollable servant with one exception, Summer BB. So yeah, you get a lot of coverage, and better yet, a rare buff type to get that multiplicative damage bonus. She can provide her own buster buff, so all you need is an external attack buff to cover all your bases. Lucky for you, both Ibaraki and Jeff Bezos give you exactly that. Not to mention they're great fits for this kind of team in general. Ibaraki in particular plays nice with Nightingale since she has a substantial defense buff, but we'll get to Nightingale Pledge a bit later. Normally you'd prefer a second support over an attacker hybrid, but Nightingale does have her perks. Again, Angel's Cry is one hell of a drug and lets you back up a number of big dick buster servants. To sweeten the deal, she has Nurse of Steel, a targeted heal capping at 4k. It also gets a strengthening soon that gives debuff immunity for 3 applications and insta-kill immunity for 1 instance to that target. This gives your main DPS a nice buffer in case they take a nasty crit from trash mobs. If your tastes are more crit related, Nightingale has an indirect benefit in that berserkers have atrocious star absorption. In other words, she won't compete for stars, letting your main attacker monopolize them. Before anyone asks, Fujino is there as an example, and you should imagine your preferred attacker in her spot. She's someone who can exploit this particular setup, as she's got a 2A2B deck, a Buster Noble Phantasm, damage reduction skill, and no hard outs to enemy NPs. She also reduces attack, which works quite nicely with Nightingale. You see, the latter's Noble Phantasm is Nightingale Pledge. It's a non-damaging arts NP that, by default, applies a huge single-turn debuff to enemy NP damage. Also heals and cleanses your party. Always nice. But on top of this, it gets an upgrade that also throws in a nasty attack debuff. If you combo this with defense buffs, damage reduction, or other attack debuffs, you can tank through enemy NPs no problem. Some of the more troublesome bosses in FGO have Invuln Pierce or preemptive buff purges, and if you don't have the DPS to power through them, Nightingale lets you take it slow. In other words, she takes a lot of the fuck you moments in this game and stops them in their tracks. Now, one potential problem is uptime. Nightingale is a berserker with no self-charging abilities or NP gain steroids. She has 2 arts cards and that's about it. To get around this, I'd consider working with the meta supports or using Prisma Cosmos. If you're confident Nightingale Pledge is all you need, Tamamu is quite nice for cooldown reduction and burst healing. Of course, they don't really synergize well with the same attackers, so there's a downside. Miu's Noble Phantasm makes her like a weird wannabe Merlin. She gives her team healing, meter, and stars per turn, but nails herself with 3k self-damage every time she pops it. This means she can easily get burst down, and her only NP defense is a gut skill, not a hard out. Nightingale covers a lot of her weaknesses, and if you go Miu NP into Nightingale Pledge, you immediately get that health back before the enemy can do anything. Nightingale in turn appreciates the meter and healing since it improves her ability to consistently use Nightingale Pledge. So why is this a meme team? Well, Miu isn't exactly the most powerful servant, and she may or may not be worse than Hans. I guess if you want to protect Miu, you gotta be ready for some scuffage. For craft essences, you have a nice variety of options. Prisma Cosmos appeals to me since it lets you build meter passively and takes pressure off constant arts chaining. Ironwool Training gives her defense, which is nice for brawling and in combination with Nightingale Pledge. Volume and Dredger Run provides 3 hits of invulnerability, and given how bullshit crits are the norm now, quite useful. Kaleidoscope is nice, especially for backline deployments. Finally, there's Maiden Halloween. It gives a massive 75% increase to healing received. You don't even need to put it on Nightingale. Say there's a character that provides value just by sitting there. Miu, for example. Maiden Halloween lets you burst heal them for huge amounts and reduces the overall maintenance involved in keeping them around. So how is Nightingale as a whole? In many ways, I see her as a better Asterios with similar but less severe drawbacks. Her ability to mangle an enemy's stats only extends to their offense, but in my book, neutering a noble phantasm is a lot more useful than getting a bit of extra damage on a turn where you use a non-damaging NP. They both have this problem where you have this great utility NP on a berserker with no tools for uptime. Not to mention Zergs have a tendency to explode from enemy crits, even from trash mobs. Keeping them alive can be a real struggle, and for the benefits Nightingale brings to challenge quests, they're undone if she gets crit for 17k and dies immediately. Her base attack is pretty weak, though she has a lot of tools to balance that out. But the problem as I see it is that her kit goes in two separate directions: supportive debuffer and Hulk smash. They aren't strictly incompatible, but exploiting both halves of Nightingale's skill set while keeping her alive and dealing with fight mechanics can be very tricky. But it is doable, and if your account's thin on its roster, that makes all the difference. Nightingale still has a lot of strong tools for challenging content, and she has a high degree of compatibility with low-cost, free-to-play servants. Mash is the obvious one, but all of the random assholes with Buster NPs too. As long as you can tank NPs, your options expand tremendously. I see that as Nightingale's biggest strength: versatility. If you have her, keep her combat ready, because she might save your ass one day. Or she might pour disinfectant on your chicken salad, also a possibility. That's all I've got. Thanks for watching, and shout out to my Twitch subscribers who met the sub goal for this video. Like if you liked it, subscribe for more, and come watch me on Twitch where I stream every weekend, 3 PM Pacific time, Friday through Sunday, except when my computer self-destructs. See you there.